The boardroom smelled of old money and older men. Cedar-paneled walls, leather chairs older than Adrian himself, and that damn oil portrait of his grandfather staring down from above like a judge. "Legacy is not a liability," barked Gerald Knox, tapping his gold pen on the table. "The Caldwell name is built on restraint, not disruption." Adrian's jaw flexed. Restraint is just fear in a better suit. A few board members chuckled. Most didn't. They just stared. Tight smiles, wrinkled hands folded over outdated reports. He was 33, CEO in name only, surrounded by men twice his age and half his vision. Every new idea he floated sank under the weight of their nostalgia. Sustainable textiles, brand partnerships with emerging designers, artist collaborations, Adrian repeated, leaning forward. "This is not radical, it's survival." No one moved. "No votes today," Gerald said smoothly. "We'll table the discussion again." Adrian stood too fast. His chair scraped back with a bark. "Of course," he said coldly. "Let's keep tabling everything until the entire industry eats us alive." He left the room without looking back. The elevator ride was a silent descent. 53 floors of pressure sliding off his shoulders in jagged pieces. By the time he hit street level, his hands were in his pockets, fists balled. He didn't call his driver. He didn't need the noise. Instead, Adrian walked through the glass doors, past the doormen who knew better than to make eye contact, down the block and around the corner to the gallery. No press, no board members, just one of the few places in the city that didn't demand a version of him. The Golden Gallery. He let himself in through the side entrance, ignored the staff, and went straight to the West Wing. He knew the way blindfolded. There it was, a painting hung low under soft track lighting. Late 19th century, storm over a quiet sea. Not famous, not flashy, but it anchored him. Always had. Something about the way the light broke through in the distance, the promise of peace after chaos. Adrian stood there, breathing through his nose, posture still tense, shoulders hunched slightly, hands clenched in his coat pockets. His mind buzzed with static, boardroom echoes, Gerald's smirk. And then, a voice behind him, soft, curious, not afraid to interrupt. "So what do you see?" Adrian turned, and there she was. Katie recognized him the moment he turned. The Caldwell jawline, the brooding eyes, the careful tailoring that said old money without trying too hard. Adrian Caldwell. She'd seen him in magazine spreads and investor roundups. The reluctant heir to a fashion empire built by people who smiled more in portraits than in real life. But here, in front of a painting, no one else seemed to notice. He looked alone. "You're Adrian Caldwell," she said gently. Not accusing, not starstruck. Just real. He blinked, as if waking from somewhere far away. "I was hoping to go one day without someone saying that." She grinned. "Sorry, you're hard to miss." He smirked. "And you are?" "Katie Maples, new artist in town. Some of my work's going up next month in the gallery's opening for Emerging Voices." He studied her for a moment. Not the kind of stare that weighed you, but one that listened, like she'd just said something worth hearing. "Nice to meet you, Katie Maples." They talked. About the painting, about storms, about why the sea was always more honest than people. She told him she liked to paint noise, emotions that didn't translate into words. He nodded like he understood. He didn't ask about her background or where she studied. He didn't name drop. He didn't pretend to care about art just to impress her. It was almost normal. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen, sighed. "I have to go. Board meeting fallout." "Sounds like a storm," she said. She teased. He glanced back at the painting. "Yeah, something like that." He left with a quiet apology and a promise. Maybe I'll see you around. A week later, she found him again, right in front of the same painting. Same expression. Katie leaned against the wall beside him. You're back. Let me guess, more boardroom drama. He gave a dry laugh. I think this thing's becoming my therapist. She tilted her head. You know, you stare at storms an awful lot for someone trying to avoid one. He looked at her then, really looked. Do you have any of your work here? He asked. Not here, but I have a small studio apartment. Messy, nothing fancy, but I've got a few canvases I don't completely hate. That night, they stood in her cramped kitchen, sipping cheap wine, surrounded by her unfinished pieces, colors punched across raw canvas, layers of emotion built up like scar tissue. He looked at one, silent. Katie watched him carefully. You don't have to say you like it. He shook his head. I do like it. It feels honest. She smiled, then looked down. The light in Katie's apartment was warm and low, just a desk lamp by the window and a few scattered candles she hadn't meant to light, but did anyway. Adrian sat on the floor beside her, legs stretched out, tie loosened, glass of wine resting between his fingers. He looked younger like this, less armor, less dynasty. Katie leaned back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. So, she said casually, is this your usual Thursday night? Spending time into artists' apartments and pretending you understand abstract expressionism? Adrian smirked. I never pretended. Fair. You're just mysterious and brooding by nature? He raised an eyebrow. You say that like it's a crime. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. Once, then again. He glanced at the screen and groaned, dragging a hand down his face. More work? Katie asked. He exhaled. Worse. My mother. She sat up straighter, curiosity piqued. Marla Caldwell? Yep, he said, popping the P. Queen of appearances, Duchess of micromanagement. Katie tilted her head. She checking in on her little prince? He gave her a tired smile. She thinks she's my keeper. Keeps a short leash. Makes sure I say the right things, wear the right suits, smile for the right cameras. Katie studied him for a second. Thoughtful. That sounds exhausting. It is. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. She looked down at her wine, then back at him. Do you ever just want to disappear? Not forever. Just long enough to remember who you actually are. Adrian glanced around her apartment. At the walls smeared with paint, the chipped mug full of brushes, the crooked bookshelf stacked with poetry books and rolled-up canvases. I think I just did, he said quietly. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. Katie broke it gently. Well, in that case, disappear all you want. Just don't steal any of my paint. I wouldn't dare, he murmured. Then he turned off his phone and set it face down on the floor. And stayed. Katie's apartment became his sanctuary. Adrian never called it that, never said the word out loud, but that's what it was. A place where he didn't have to be the Caldwell heir, where no one asked him to lead, or win, or represent anything other than himself. They kept their distance, at first. Shared wine, shared music, shared long talks stretched into early mornings. He'd fall asleep on the worn couch sometimes, jacket folded over a paint-splattered chair. Katie never pressed, never leaned in. They were careful until the night of her gallery showing. It was her night. The space was humming with critics, collectors, and curious onlookers. Katie wore a simple black dress that clung to her ribs and made her eyes look darker than usual. Adrian stood in the back at first, hidden in plain sight, watching her light up as people actually saw her work, saw her. When she finally found him through the crowd, something shifted between them. She smiled like she had all night, but this time it was only for him. Not for approval, not for attention, just for him. Afterwards, back at her place, the tension they both pretended wasn't there finally cracked. No more sitting across the room, no more shoulder brushes and quick glances. That night, everything changed. With one kiss, that lingered too long. One hand held a second too late. After that, they stopped pretending. But they didn't go public. They couldn't. The Caldwell name wasn't built for romance with unknown artists in rent-controlled apartments, so they kept it quiet. Intimate dinners at her place, middle-of-the-night visits, long weekends stolen without explanation. And Adrian, he changed. He started smiling more, laughing in meetings, pushing back at the board, but without his usual edge. There was a new calm in him, one that didn't come from money or power or legacy. Marla noticed. They were in the penthouse conference room, reviewing quarterly performance, when she cut through the numbers mid-sentence. "You're unusually cheerful lately," she said. Adrian didn't look up from his tablet. "Is that a problem?" "It's unfamiliar," she said with a cool smile. "You're more relaxed, more forgiving." He shrugged. "Maybe I'm just finally breathing." Marla's eyes narrowed. "What changed?" "Nothing that concerns you," he said too quickly, then caught himself. She didn't argue, didn't ask again, but later that week, she made a call. Marla decided to follow Adrian daily moves. The photos arrived in a black envelope, hand-delivered to her office, discreet, untraceable. Marla didn't open them right away. She finished her tea first, setting the porcelain cup gently on the saucer. Then, with a quiet sigh, she slipped on her glasses and pulled the envelope open. 10 photos, high resolution, time-stamped. Adrian, stepping out of a brownstone in the Lower East Side at 1:34 a.m. Adrian unlocking the building door with a key at 10:57 p.m. Adrian leaving with a paint-smeared duffel bag in one hand, his jacket slung over his shoulder, his face soft, too soft. Then came the ones of her. Katie Maples, artist, 29, recent transplant from Portland, no connections, no pedigree, no profile. The only reason she was even on Marla's radar now was because of proximity. The last photo was the one that made her pause. Katie and Adrian, on the fire escape, sharing takeout, his head tipped back in laughter, her fingers brushing his. Both barefoot, both unaware of the world watching. Marla set the photos down like she was handling evidence of a crime. This wasn't a fling. It was a liability. And liabilities got cleaned up. Rain tapped gently at the windows. Inside, Adrian sat cross-legged on the floor of Katie's apartment, flipping through one of her sketchbooks while she rinsed out her brushes. "Do you ever paint anything happy?" he asked with a half-smile. Katie smirked over her shoulder. "Define happy." "I don't know. Less raw." She shrugged. "Raw is honest." He nodded, still flipping. "I think that's what I like about you." She froze mid-rinse. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and pretended not to. "You don't ask me to be anyone," he said quietly. "Not the Caldwell brand, not some leader or fixer. Just me." Katie leaned against the counter, towel in hand. "That's the only version I want." He looked up at her then, and for a moment, the world felt paused, like the kind of silence you get after a snowfall, or before a confession. Adrian stood, walked over, and kissed her, slow and certain. Afterward, they lay tangled on the couch, under a threadbare blanket, the city outside humming quietly. Neither of them knew about the photos. Neither of them knew Marla had already drafted the first version of the NDA. But something was coming, and in the stillness, they held onto each other just a little tighter, like maybe they both sensed their happiness wasn't going to last long. It was a quiet afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the windows of Katie's apartment, dancing across the floor in soft gold strips. The hum of the city buzzed in the background, a familiar rhythm that made her feel grounded, safe. She was mid-brushstroke when the knock came. Not the usual soft tap from Adrian. This was sharp, precise. "No," Marla said. "I'm realistic, and so are you. I looked into you. No trust fund, no art degree, no influence. You scrape by. You paint pain and hope someone hangs it on a wall long enough to feel something. You live in a shoebox and think passion is enough. Katie's jaw clenched, but her voice stayed steady. You don't scare me. Marla leaned in, just enough. You should be scared of what happens to people who get in my family's way. Katie didn't flinch. Marla turned toward the door, perfectly composed. Break it off, or I will. She didn't wait for a reply. She walked out, heels clicking like a metronome of control, leaving the photos behind, on the counter like ashes after a fire. Katie stared at them for a long time. Then, she picked them up. Adrian knew something was wrong the second he walked into Katie's apartment, and found it quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from absence. No music. No scent of paint. No laughter echoing from the bathroom, where she always sang off-key when she thought he couldn't hear. Just a single canvas on the easel, unfinished, and a note taped to the fridge in Katie's neat handwriting. I need space. Goodbye. That was it. No explanation. But he already knew. He stormed into the Caldwell Tower 3 hours later, ignoring the receptionist, the board members, the staff who knew better than to meet his eyes when they burned like this. He didn't even knock when he entered his mother's office. Marla looked up from her desk, composed as ever. What did you do? He said, voice cold and cutting. I did what needed to be done, she replied, before you ruined everything. You had me followed. That girl is not your future. That not yours, decisions to make. It's mine. Marla rose slowly, eyes narrowing. You are not some average man who gets to fall in love with a waitress and play house in the city. You are a Caldwell. You represent more than yourself. I represent myself first, and I'm done pretending I don't know what I want. Marla stepped closer. You are throwing away everything we've built, everything you will inherit. No, Adrian said. I'm finally choosing something real. There was nothing else to say. He turned and walked out, pulse steady, hands clenched. He called Katie. She didn't pick up. He returned to her place. He knew Katie couldn't leave her painting behind. They means too much to her. He was pacing across the floor when she opens the door. Adrian pulled Katie into his arms, holding her tight. I spoke to my mother, Adrian speaking softly into her ear. I told her, she have no control over my life. Adrian took a deep breath. Katie, you need to know. I love you. It's time that everyone see how much we're not going to hide anymore. Katie begins to cry. I love you too, Adrian. That night, cameras flashed the second Adrian Caldwell stepped out of the black car and into the lights of Les Trois, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. He was wearing a black suit, no tie, sleeves rolled just enough to look deliberate. But what caught the city's attention wasn't him, it was who was at his side. Katie Maples, hair pinned simply, a deep green dress that clung like confidence, no press smile, no dramatic entrance, just quiet resolve, hand tucked into his. Adrian didn't say a word to the photographers, but the message was clear. This is who I'm with. This is my choice. Let the world watch. Inside, he pulled out her chair, sat across from her. Katie looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes held pain, hope, something trembling between fear and love. And then she reached across the table and took his hand. The photos were everywhere the next morning. Caldwell heir debuts mystery woman at Les Trois. Who is Katie Maples? From unknown artist to power, date, rebel romance, or brand suicide. Within hours, every fashion and business site had a theory. The story exploded on social media. Clips of them arriving hand in hand, stills of Katie's green dress, grainy zoom-ins of them laughing over wine. And inside Caldwell International, chaos erupted. The boardroom that had once only stifled Adrian now felt openly hostile. Are you trying to tank the brand? One executive snapped. Public spectacle? Another hissed. You paraded a woman no one's vetted in front of the press like it was a red carpet stunt. Adrian sat at the head of the table, unbothered. She's not a stunt. She's my partner. Gerald Knox leaned forward, voice slow and venomous. You are the face of this company. Everything you do reflects on the legacy your grandfather built. Adrian met his gaze. Then maybe it's time we change what that legacy reflects. Murmurs, scowls, but he didn't flinch. Later that day, he stood alone in the glass elevator, watching the city blur below him, the buzz of his phone constant. Headlines, investors, press requests. It was loud, but it wasn't regret. Marla watched the footage on mute. Adrian and Katie smiling for paparazzi like this was a romance movie and not a corporate disaster. Her jaw tightened. He'd embarrassed her. Undermined everything she built. And worse, he'd fallen for her. Katie Maples. She was a threat now. Not because she was dangerous, but because she was real. And real things were messy. Uncontrollable. Marla made a call. Brief, cold. I want every piece of her background. Friends, family, finances. Sign me something I can use. Back in her apartment, Katie stared at her phone. Dozens of missed calls. Messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Her Instagram flooded. Articles with her name misspelled. Photos of her walking the dog 2 years ago, suddenly newsworthy. She felt like she'd been dragged into a spotlight without armor. And yet, Adrian had shown up, stood beside her, faced it all. But she also knew Marla wasn't done. The storm wasn't over. The test sat on the edge of the sink like it was mocking her. 2 pink lines. She checked it 3 times. Same result. Katie sat on the floor of the tiny bathroom in her apartment, knees pulled tight to her chest. Fingernails dug into her scalp like they could squeeze the moment away. This wasn't part of the plan. She was supposed to be invisible. Quiet. A footnote in Adrian Caldwell's life. Someone who stepped back before things got too complicated. But now it wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about him. There was a third heartbeat in the equation. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her mind was too loud. Would he even want it? Would he walk away from his family for this? Would Marla ruin her? Would they ever be safe? She imagined Adrian holding the test in his hand. How he'd probably go silent, jaw tight, eyes full of questions. He wouldn't yell. He wouldn't run. She thought about the way he looked at her. Like she wasn't just a part of his escape, but the only place he could breathe. She thought about how he'd rest his head in her lap and say nothing for 20 minutes. Because sometimes silence was more honest than any conversation. She wanted to believe he could be ready. But she'd seen what readiness looked like in Marla's world. Arranged lives, curated images, emotions that fit within the quarterly report. They would never be clean enough for that world. Katie stared at her reflection. Messy hair, tired eyes, paint on her forearm, and something growing inside her. She placed a hand on her stomach and whispered, I don't know what I'm doing, but I promise I'll protect you, no matter what. The next morning, she drafted 2 letters, one for Adrian, one for herself. Katie didn't sleep that night. She just watched the hours change on her cracked phone screen, eyes fixed, heart thudding like a war drum inside her chest. She had decided. She was going to tell him. She put on something simple. Black jeans, a loose shirt, nothing dramatic. She wasn't going to make this some cinematic reveal. Just the truth, finally spoken out loud. The doorman at Caldwell Tower recognized her but looked uneasy. Mr. Caldwell isn't in right now, he said, eyes flicking to the side. But Mrs. Caldwell is. She asked me to escort you up. Katie hesitated. Every instinct told her no, but part of her thought maybe this was the grown-up thing. Maybe this time, Marla wouldn't be a villain. Maybe they could talk. That hope died the moment the elevator doors opened. Marla was waiting, arms crossed, a thin smile stretched tight across her face. "Miss Maples," she said, "how brave of you." "I'm here to see Adrian," Katie said, standing tall. "I know." Marla gestured to the sitting area. "But I thought we should have a conversation first." Katie didn't sit. "I'm pregnant," she said flatly. "You can either get out of my way, or I'll tell him in front of your entire board." Marla didn't flinch. She stepped forward, voice smooth and laced with ice. "You think this child will change anything?" Katie blinked. "It changes everything." "No," Marla said. "It changes nothing. It just adds leverage you think you have. But let me be clear. A child born into this family is not yours alone. It becomes ours. You think you're protecting him. Or this child? You're not. You're destabilizing a global brand with personal drama." Katie's eyes flashed. "He's not your puppet." Marla pulled something from the drawer. A document, thick, official-looking. "We anticipated this. That you'd come back. That you might be pregnant." Katie's stomach dropped. It was a pre-drafted custody agreement, attached to an NDA. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a blueprint. "You sign this," Marla said, calm as stone, "and we ensure you receive everything you need. Housing, healthcare, privacy. But Adrian doesn't need to know. Not yet. Not with everything else on his shoulders." Katie stared at the paper. "You want me to erase him from his own child's life?" "No," Marla said. "I want to control how it enters his life." Katie stood frozen, fury and fear tangled in her chest. Then Marla stepped closer, voice low and final. "Do you really think he'll choose you over everything he was born to protect?" Katie didn't answer. The room smelled like steel and roses, clinical, expensive, and somehow angry. Katie stood across from Marla, who looked more like a CEO than a mother. Cold eyes, diamond cufflinks, a smile sharp enough to cut skin. "This isn't personal," Marla said, sliding a cream folder across the table. "It's practical." Katie didn't touch it. "You love my son," Marla continued, as if she were commenting on the weather. "Fine. But he won't love you the way you think. Not with his name. Not with his legacy at stake." A lawyer in a charcoal suit walked in and remained silent beside Marla, tapping his pen. Every tick was another second Katie's future slipped away. "I don't want your money," Katie said. Marla leaned in slightly. "But you'll take the deal." She opened the folder. A non-disclosure agreement, neatly typed, a number that made Katie's eyes sting. 7 digits, tax-free. Disappear and start over money. "And if I don't?" Katie asked. Her voice shook, but she didn't flinch. Marla's tone hardened. "You're an unwed, unemployed artist with no health insurance, carrying the child of a man whose family built an empire. If you try to go public, I will bury you in court filings before you even find a lawyer." Katie stared at the document. The room was so quiet, she could hear her own breath. She could still feel Adrian's lips on her shoulder that morning. They talked about maybe, just maybe, being real. Going public, choosing love. He didn't know she was here. He didn't know what his mother had planned. Katie reached for the pen, her signature scratched across the page like a scar. Marla slid a sleek envelope across the table. "The wire will be processed within the hour." Katie pushed it back. "I am not for sale." Then she stood, folded the NDA, and walked out, money untouched. She didn't say goodbye. Not to Marla, not to Adrian. She just vanished. And with her, the only truth that might have saved them both. Katie left behind her sketchbook. She did it on purpose. It was sitting on the windowsill the morning she walked out, still open to a charcoal drawing of Adrian's hands, quiet, steady, the only part of him she could draw from memory, without messing it up. She didn't take the photo. She didn't take the wine glass he always used. She didn't even take the canvas he bought her from that tiny shop in Brooklyn. She packed 2 bags. And one more thing. A small, plastic test that changed everything. She hadn't planned to disappear. But after Marla, after the threats, after hearing he'll do what he's told, like Adrian was a puppet on a family-owned string, she knew love wouldn't be enough. She wasn't going to be the woman the press tore apart. She wasn't going to be used as bait in Marla's empire games. And she sure as hell wasn't going to bring a child into a world built on manipulation. So she left. Maybe not forever, just long enough to figure out what kind of mother she'd need to be. Adrian's call went to voicemail. Again. He checked the time, 3:42 p.m., then hit redial, pacing across his office like the floor might split under him. 1 ring, 2, 5. Voicemail. Katie, it's me. Call me back, please. He tried again, and again. Nothing. A cold knot started forming in his chest. He couldn't sit still. He left the office without telling anyone and headed straight to her apartment. The building was quiet, almost too quiet, and when he reached her floor, he froze. 2 men in gray uniforms were inside, carefully wrapping and boxing Katie's canvases. Her whole life, paint, brushes, raw, half-finished pieces, all being packed up like inventory. "Hey," Adrian barked. "What the hell are you doing?" One of the movers looked up. "Just doing our job. Gallery pickup. We're supposed to transport these downtown." "Who gave the order?" Adrian asked, stepping into the apartment like it hadn't once been the only place he felt real. "We don't know. Someone from the gallery, I think." He scanned the room, her plant still alive on the windowsill, a coffee mug half full, the faint scent of her still lingering. Gone. Just like that. Adrian clenched his fists. He went straight to the gallery next. The assistant curator blinked in confusion when he stormed through the door. "No, we haven't seen Katie in over a week," she said, flipping through a clipboard. She said she needed time. Her work was scheduled for relocation. "That's all I know." "She didn't tell anyone where she went?" Adrian asked, barely holding it together. The woman hesitated. "Look, I'm not trying to get involved. People disappear all the time when the media starts circling. It's not unusual." Adrian didn't respond. He didn't believe it. This wasn't Katie running. This was someone pushing. An hour later, he stood in front of the glass doors of Caldwell Tower, jaw clenched, rage simmering beneath his skin. He walked into his mother's office without knocking. Marla looked up from a stack of contracts, perfectly composed as always. "Adrian," she said, "you look tense." "Where is she?" he said, voice low. Marla blinked. "Huh? Don't play games. Katie, she's gone." Her place cleared out. No messages, nothing. And somehow, the timing lines up perfectly with our dinner going viral. Marla stood slowly, smoothing out the sleeves of her blouse. "Adrian, maybe the pressure was too much. A woman like that, anonymity is a shield. You took that from her." He stepped forward. "If I find out you had anything to do with her leaving, if you sent anyone, said anything, even whispered a threat, you will regret it." Marla's expression sharpened. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm promising you," he said. "If you cost me the one real thing I've ever had, you'll pay for it." Marla took a breath, eyes icy. "You're a Caldwell," she said calmly. "You don't get to run off with a fling and pretend you're someone else. You have obligations, expectations, and you will fall in line, like your father did, like his father before him." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then maybe it's time I break the damn line." He walked out, fire in his chest, and one thought echoing louder than anything else. He was going to find her, no matter what it cost. She arrived in Texas, looking like someone who'd outrun a storm and barely survived it. William didn't ask questions at first, just picked her up from the airport, loaded her bags into the truck, and drove in silence while she stared out the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Katie hadn't left the guest room in 3 days. On day 4, She finally cracked. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she didn't drink and whispered everything. About Adrian, Marla, the threats, the baby. William didn't interrupt. He just listened, face hardening with every detail. When she was done, her voice thin and tired, he only asked one question. Do you want him to know? Katie stared into the steam rising from her mug. I don't know what I want. I just know I don't trust his world. That night, while Katie was in the shower, William sat on the back porch, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the screen. He didn't like secrets, but he didn't like leaving his cousin alone with this weight, even less. He found Adrian's number in her phone and sent the message. Katie is safe with family in Texas. The reply came fast. Where is she? William typed slower this time. Can't say yet. Time will come. We'll keep you updated on her condition. A long pause. Condition? Is she sick? William hesitated. Then, don't tell anyone we spoke, especially your family. I'll text again later. He put the phone down. The air was heavy with more than just heat. The text hit like a punch to the chest. Condition. Family. Don't tell anyone. His head spun with worst-case scenarios. Illness? An accident? Was she in danger? He texted again, twice. No answer. He called, straight to voicemail. He wanted to drive to Texas right then, but there was no address, no clue where to begin. He was left with only the sharp edge of uncertainty and the boiling frustration that came with it. So he did what he was raised to do. He buried it. Adrian threw himself into work with a fury that unsettled even the board. Meetings, strategy, travel, anything to burn the hours. His jaw stayed locked. His answers were short. His charm, gone. He became a colder, harder man. But every night the silence got louder. Every night he checked his phone for a message that didn't come. And every night he stared at the painting of the stormy sea that now hangs in his penthouse office and thought of her. The only person who ever saw him without the mask. 3 weeks. That's how long it had been since Katie disappeared. 21 days of half-sleep and quiet rage. Since that one cryptic text from a stranger, Adrian hadn't heard another word. Nothing from Katie. Nothing from her so-called family. Nothing but silence and shadows. And still, Marla had the nerve to walk into his office like she hadn't scorched everything that mattered to him. She stood near the window, in her sharp blazer and diamond earrings, phone in hand, already talking as if they were back on the same page. We've confirmed dinner with the Morrisons tonight. Celine will be there. Charming girl. Her family's launching a philanthropic line, an excellent brand fit, and... No, Adrian said, barely looking up from his laptop. Marla blinked. Excuse me? You have a dinner date. I'm working. She stepped forward, tone clipped. Adrian, it's time to move on. That girl is gone. She ran. You don't owe her loyalty. You owe your family name responsibility. Adrian slowly stood. No. What I owe, he said, voice rising, is honesty, something this family hasn't practiced in decades. Marla's eyes narrowed. Don't start this again, he sapped. You are not my life. You're a gatekeeper to a world I'm done being chained to. From now on, you do not walk into my office uninvited. You do not speak to me unless it's business related. Her expression went still, dangerous, calculated. You forget who made you, she said coldly. No, Adrian said. I'm finally remembering who I was before you started running my life. He pointed to the door. Get out. Marla hesitated, lips twitching like she wanted to say more, but didn't. She turned and left without another word. Adrian didn't sit down. He went straight to the secured archive room 2 floors below. No cameras, no assistants, just rows of cabinets and hard copy records from when his grandfather, Adrian Caldwell, ran the empire like a monarchy. Reports. Off-book transactions, hush agreements, Old stock movements that never made it into the official filings. Adrian knew there were skeletons. Whispers of hostile takeovers, bribes to suppress worker scandals, backdoor deals to muscle out competitors. If he could find proof, something real, he could dismantle the control Marla and the legacy board had held over him since day one. He worked for hours, flipping through files yellowed with time, scanning ledgers and notes in his grandfather's shaky script. And then, he finally found it, after weeks of digging. A manila folder, unmarked, buried behind tax records from 1987. Inside, sealed legal documents, a non-disclosure agreement, and photos. Not unlike the ones taken of him and Katie, but older, rougher. A payoff, and a name he recognized. Gerald Knox, board member, family friend, corporate puppet master. Adrian leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. This isn't just business anymore. It was a war now, and he finally had a weapon. 12 weeks. Katie stared at the ultrasound image in her hand, barely able to breathe. The shape was small but unmistakable now. A heartbeat, a curve, a flicker of a future. You need to slow down, the doctor had said gently. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. If it doesn't stabilize, you could lose the baby. The words echoed louder than the heartbeat. Lose my baby. She walked out of the clinic in a daze, blinking against the Texas sun like she'd stepped into the wrong world. Her legs carried her home, but her mind stayed in that cold exam room. William was in the kitchen when she came in, flipping through bills. One look at her face, and he dropped the envelope. What's wrong? Something happened? She sat slowly at the table, the sonogram still trembling in her hand. I'm at risk. The stress, the hiding, everything, it's too much. If I don't calm down, I might lose this baby. William didn't speak. Tears welled in her eyes. I wish she was here. I wish Adrian was here. I wish he knew he had a daughter on the way. She didn't sob. She just broke quietly, her voice cracking, her shoulders folding in. In New York, Adrian was staring at the proof. Over the past month, he had unraveled a quiet empire of corruption. Side deals hidden in shell companies, off-the-books slush funds, and payout memos with Knox's name signed across them in thick, entitled ink. And Marla? She knew. She'd approved the payments. She'd protected the lies. He had the documents, the dates, and enough leverage to tear the board apart. For the first time, he didn't just have power. He had purpose. And then, his phone lit up. A text from William. Can you leave town for a few days? Adrian's heart slammed against his ribs. Yes. When? Where? The reply came fast. This weekend. Houston. Daisy Cafe. Lincoln Street. No explanation. No mention of Katie. But he knew. He didn't pack a bag right away. He just stared at the message, whispering her name under his breath like a prayer. Katie. She was alive. She was waiting. And maybe, just maybe, he could still make this right. The Daisy Cafe was half empty, humming with quiet conversation and the scent of fresh biscuits and burnt espresso. Adrian sat at a corner table, a black hoodie pulled low over his face, fingers drumming restlessly against his coffee cup. It had been months since he last saw Katie. He had rehearsed what he'd say, dozens of versions in his head. Anger, apology, heartbreak. None of them felt right now. Then, the bell over the door chimed. William walked in, wearing the same serious face he had in every text. No small talk, no hesitation. He walked straight over and slid into the seat across from Adrian. Neither of them spoke at first. Then, William reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded photo. He placed it on the table, face down. Adrian looked at him, then flipped it over. It was a sonogram. Tiny, fragile, real. The world stopped moving. She's 12 weeks, William said quietly. But it hasn't been easy. Her blood pressure's been spiking. Doctor said if it doesn't stabilize, she could lose the baby. Adrian didn't move, didn't blink. Tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. Slow, silent, unannounced. He gripped the photo like it might float away if he let go. She didn't tell me. I know, William said. She was scared, cornered. Adrian looked up, eyes wet, voice cracking. Do you know everything? Why she left? William nodded once. Yeah, I know everything. Adrian's jaw clenched. Then tell me. Please, I deserve that. William's expression didn't change. Not yet. First you need to see Katie. Talk to her. You need to look her in the eye and remember what this is really about. Adrian leaned back, swallowing hard. I just want her safe, he said. I want both of them safe. You still love her? Every damn day. William nodded again. She's at the house. I'll take you to her. Adrian stood, still holding the photo, like it was the most important thing he'd ever owned. This wasn't just a reunion. This was a reckoning. Katie stood barefoot in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of peppermint tea the doctor told her would help. But it didn't. Nothing helped. Not really. Not the quiet of the Texas air, not the hum of the old ceiling fan. Not even the way the baby's image lived in her mind now, like a flickering candle she couldn't let go out. William had gone into town. She assumed it was for groceries. She had no idea he'd gone to bring back her past. When the knock came, it was soft, almost hesitant. She didn't move right away. Then came a second knock. Chambre. Katie opened the door, and there he was. Adrian, standing on the porch, hood down, sun catching in his eyes, holding a folded photo in one hand like it was sacred. For a moment, they just stared. She looked pale, tired, changed. He looked wrecked, but somehow stronger. I didn't know how to find you, he said, his voice low and breaking. I didn't want to be found, she whispered, tears already filling her eyes. Adrian stepped forward slowly, carefully. Is it true, we're having a baby? She nodded. 12 weeks. He blinked hard, a tear slipping down his cheek. Why didn't you tell me? Katie's voice cracked. Because your mother threatened me, said you'd fall in line, that you'd never choose this, us. I didn't want to be another piece of leverage in a world I'll never belong to. Adrian stepped closer, eyes burning. You think I wouldn't fight for you? She hesitated. I didn't want you to have to. He reached out, gently took her hand, and placed the sonogram photo between them. I've been fighting everything since you left. The board, my mother, the business. But I'd burn all of it down if it meant keeping you safe. Katie shook her head, breath catching. It's not that simple. It is now, he said. I know everything, what my mother did, what Knox did. I'm not just walking away from them, I'm taking them down. She looked at him, stunned. How? Adrian gave a sad smile. By being the one Caldwell who finally tells the truth. Silence settled between them for a beat. Then Katie stepped forward, laid a hand over her stomach. She can hear everything now, she whispered. The baby. She hears my heartbeat. Yours too, if you're close enough. He stepped closer, placed his hand gently where hers rested. For the first time, they both breathed. Together. I missed you, she said softly. I never stopped missing you. She leaned into his chest, finally letting herself fall, and Adrian held her like he'd never let go again. Adrian didn't want to leave Texas. For the first time in months, he felt like a human being again. Not a brand, not a last name. Just a man, with someone he loved and a life growing inside her. But he had work to do. Before he left, Katie handed him something wrapped in a scarf. I wasn't going to use it, she said quietly. But I kept it, just in case. Inside was a small flash drive. The audio file was clear, Marla's voice sharp and deliberate, the lawyer silent but complicit. Katie's voice quieter, shaking but steady. You'll take the deal. If you go public, we'll bury you. Sign it and disappear. Adrian had listened to it 3 times on the flight home. Each time, his hands clenched tighter. But when he landed, he didn't go to the Caldwell Tower. He went to his lawyer. They met in a discreet midtown office Adrian had leased months earlier, one of his few moves done quietly, away from the board and away from Marla's eyes. Tasha Leone, his attorney, was already reviewing the NDA when he walked in. "This was coercion," she said without looking up. "You can hear it. It's legally flimsy, especially if the money wasn't accepted." Adrian nodded. "She didn't take the money. She just left." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "Good. That helps. But we need to act now. Before your mother gets wind you've got this." He handed her the flash drive. "Make digital and physical copies. Off-site. Secure. I want every angle covered." "And Katie?" she asked gently. "The baby? I want full financial security set up in her name. A trust. Healthcare. Housing. Whatever she needs under her full control, not mine. I don't want her tied to me by money. I want her protected from my money." Tasha smiled faintly. "You're planning for war." "No," Adrian said, eyes cold. "I'm planning for peace. And I know who I'll have to fight to get it." She sat back, nodding slowly. "So what's next?" Adrian stood, adjusted his cufflink, and looked out the window. "We build the wall before the fire hits," he said. "Then I tell my mother exactly what I think of her." The boardroom smelled like old confidence, polished mahogany, coffee brewed too strong, and generational entitlement. Adrian sat at the head of the long table, expression unreadable. Beside him, Tasha Leone flipped open a sleek black folder, calm and composed. Across the room, Gerald Knox, smug as ever. Marla Caldwell, poised in her signature black blazer, the picture of control. The meeting began with routine reports: revenue, brand growth, expansion strategies. Adrian barely listened. Then, halfway through Knox's financial recap, Adrian raised a hand. "Let's pause for a moment," he said, voice level. "There's something I'd like to address." Knox frowned. "If it's about the proposed licensing deal, we can table that until Q3. "It's not," Adrian interrupted. "It's about integrity." That got their attention. Tasha pressed a button on a small speaker in front of her. Audio filled the room. Marla's voice. "You'll take the deal. If you go public, we'll bury you. Sign it and disappear." The room froze. "This family does not get involved in scandals. You'll take the money, and you'll never speak Adrian's name again." Adrian watched their faces. Knox turned pale. Marla's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. "I want the minutes to reflect," Adrian said, "that what you're hearing is a recording of my mother and Mr. Knox's counsel coercing a young woman into signing an NDA under threat of reputation destruction." Silence. Tasha slid a set of documents across the table to each board member. "We've independently verified the recording. The NDA was never legally enforceable. No funds were accepted. The woman in question is carrying Adrian Caldwell's child." Knox spoke first, voice cracking. "You can't just—" "I can," Adrian snapped. "And I will. The Caldwell name has survived decades of hidden scandals, but not anymore. As of today, I'm initiating a full audit of all off-book transactions going back 30 years, and I'm filing a motion to remove any board members involved in unethical or illegal conduct." Marla finally spoke, voice low and cutting. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't burn your legacy down just to protect her, some girl." "I'm not protecting her," Adrian said. "I'm protecting my family, the one I chose, the one you tried to erase." He stood. "Anyone who wants to stay on this board will cooperate fully with the audit. If not, resign, or wait to be removed and publicly named." Knox stood too, furious. "You'll destroy the company." Adrian stepped closer, unflinching. Then maybe it deserves to be destroyed. Marla didn't move, didn't blink. She just sat there, her kingdom cracking around her, and realized, for the first time in her life, that she had lost control. The boardroom had cleared. Only two remained. Adrian stood near the window, back to the table, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a chessboard. Behind him, Marla sat perfectly still, hands folded, eyes burning. "You just committed career suicide," she said coldly. "And for what? A woman who paints in a shoebox apartment? A child that isn't even born?" Adrian didn't turn around. "I expected threats," he said calmly. "You disappoint me by being so predictable." She stood. "Don't be naive," she snapped. "You think you're in control now? You think the board will stand by you when the money starts bleeding? You think regulators won't come after you too? You grew up in this house. You know how these things end." "I do," Adrian said, finally turning to face her. "Which is why I already contacted the SEC. I gave them the audit records," he continued, voice steady. "Knox's backdoor deals, the offshore accounts, the real shareholder ledger. Expect their arrival within the week." Marla's face twitched, but only slightly. "And if you think you can retaliate in silence," Adrian added, stepping closer, "if anything happens to Katie, to our child, to anyone remotely connected to me, know this. I've already briefed the state attorney general's office. I gave them copies of the same files. If I so much as stub my toe suspiciously, they'll be on your doorstep before your lawyer can make bail." "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "I have," he said, locking eyes with her. "I've spent my entire life watching you control people through fear. That ends now. You're done running this family. You're done running me." A long pause, then Marla smiled. It was small, hollow, almost sad. "You were never supposed to be the threat," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I learned from the best." He walked out, not looking back. And for the first time in her life, Marla Caldwell didn't have a move to play. The Texas air was thick with summer when Adrian returned to Katie. She met him at the edge of the property, barefoot in the grass, belly round under a flowing cotton dress, one hand resting protectively over the life growing inside her. Adrian stepped out of the car, holding nothing but a small box. They didn't say anything for a moment. Then he walked straight up to her, took her hand, and pressed the box into her palm. Inside, a simple gold band. "I don't want to waste time," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I want to marry you, today. Not for a headline, not to fix anything. Just because I can't imagine going through another second of life without being yours." Katie's throat caught. "We don't have anything planned," she whispered. "We have everything we need," he said. "You, me, and her." They got married under the old oak tree in William's backyard, with nothing but late sun, bare feet, and a ring. No press, no guests, just vows spoken with full hearts and tired eyes. Katie didn't return to New York until she was nearly full term. By then, Adrian had done what he promised. Knox was gone. 3 board members stepped down under pressure. Marla remained, quiet and distant, her power broken. Adrian reshaped the brand from the inside out, installing a new leadership team focused on transparency, sustainability, and actual human values. The penthouse was different now. Lighter. The storm painting still hung in his office, but now it had company. 2 of Katie's works, vibrant and alive. She took her time adjusting, let the city come to her slowly, but by month 8, she could finally walk through the doors of the Caldwell Tower without flinching. It was just after midnight when Katie felt the first contraction. Adrian was already awake, typing quietly beside her in bed. She gripped his hand without a word. He looked up. Her eyes said everything. They drove to the hospital in silence, interrupted only by deep breaths and quiet curses. Katie's hand clutched the door handle. Adrian's hand never left hers. Hours passed. Her labor was hard. complicated by her earlier health scares, monitored closely by the OB team Adrian had personally vetted. Sweat beaded at Katie's temples, her body trembling, but she never once let go of Adrian's hand. "You're almost there," the doctor said. Adrian whispered in her ear, "You're the strongest thing I've ever seen. You've got her." And at 9:46 a.m., with the sun breaking through the gray hospital sky, their daughter was born. 7 pounds, 11 ounces. A scream loud enough to silence the world. Adrian held her first, chest shaking, tears in his eyes. Then he placed her in Katie's arms. "She's here," he whispered. "You did it." Katie looked down at the tiny, wrinkled face, so new, so fierce, and felt something click into place deep inside her. She looked up at Adrian and smiled through tears. "Her name is Clara." He kissed Katie's forehead and whispered, "Clara Caldwell, a stormbreaker." The Caldwell estate had never felt this quiet. Marla sat in the sunroom alone, surrounded by manicured hedges, antique furniture, and silence. No assistants, no meetings, no calls. Just echoes of power that no longer belonged to her. On the table in front of her sat a single photo. It had arrived in a plain envelope, no return address. But she knew the hand that sent it. The picture was candid. Katie in a cozy sweater, holding baby Clara in her lap. Adrian was beside them, smiling without performance, his hand resting protectively on their daughter's back. Clara's eyes were bright, her hands curled into Katie's necklace. She was already full of life and calm joy, something Marla had once mistaken for weakness. She stared at the image for a long time. Then her phone rang. Adrian. Her heart leapt before she crushed the feeling down. She answered coolly. "Adrian." His voice was calm but sharp. "I know you got the photo." "I did," she said. "She's beautiful. I'd like to meet her." A long pause. Then, with finality, "No." Marla blinked. "Adrian, I'm not doing this with you anymore," he said. "Not the guilt, not the manipulation, not the constant war between legacy and love. I'm her grandmother," she said, her voice tightening. "You don't get to erase me." "You erased yourself," Adrian replied. "The moment you threatened her mother, the moment you decided power mattered more than people." Marla stood, hand gripping the back of the chair. "You're making a mistake." "No," Adrian said. "I'm protecting my family." "You are my family," screamed Marla. "Not anymore," he said softly. "You're blood, but you're not home. And Clara will never have to unlearn the damage you taught me." She had nothing to say to that. Adrian took a deep breath. "We are done." The line went dead. She stood there, phone in hand, the photo still staring up at her. For the first time in her life, Marla Caldwell wasn't feared, or admired, or obeyed. She was simply alone. 1 year later, the Caldwell name still carried weight. These days, it meant something different. Under Adrian's leadership, the company had shifted. Less curated perfection, more conscious change. Transparency became a pillar. Legacy stopped being a leash. He never gave a press conference about what happened with the board. He just built something better. At home, things were quieter, stronger. Katie's work now hung in more than galleries. It appeared in design houses and fashion campaigns. But her favorite piece sat above their fireplace, painting of storm clouds breaking apart, light pouring through in soft, golden streaks. Clara had just learned to walk, and she did so like she had somewhere important to be. Always toward Adrian or Katie, always giggling, always fearless. They lived outside the city now, in a modern farmhouse surrounded by trees and peace. No staff, no drama, no headlines, just love. On Clara's first birthday, they threw a small party with friends and a cake she immediately destroyed with her hands. Adrian lifted her into the air afterward, eyes shining, and whispered, "You're the best thing I ever did right." Katie watched them from the porch, heart full. They'd made it through the storm. And now, finally, they were home. The end. Thank you for listening to Green Tea Tales. Help our channel to grow with likes, shares, and subscribes.